Do you want to read a sample for people so they could taste it?
I could read the intro and then maybe some passages, or just some stanzas,
Yeah,
some passages.
whatever calls to you.
Well, for people who don't know much about the story, I can read from the main book, especially people who are interested in the module, which is something I'm almost even halfway done with now. But this is from book one. This is the introduction, and hopefully Banjo doesn't bark in the background. uh, it says, once in space and time primeval, when all the cosmos dwelled in darkness, something called a star appeared. We know not where, nor how, or why, but it would change the cosmos forever. Stars are strange and beautiful creatures. If we look at our sun too long, it blinds us. If we linger too long in the sun, it burns us. Too much sun can make a desert, but without the sun, our world would die. Neither tree nor fragile flower, no living creature would exist. There would be no light, no warmth, only darkness, cold, and death. But stars like the sun are beacons of hope. The sun never sleeps, it burns without fail, and stars do not wish to be rewarded, they do what must be done. In the universe primeval, there are some who wish to banish light, to extinguish the stars forever. These are known as black hole stars, photovores, stars of evil, the most destructive force in the universe, the most destructive in the cosmos. Their evil is eternal. Such is the burden of stars, the fate of the universe, stars like our sun, for only stars can slay black holes, only stars can hold them at bay. So begins the mythology of stars, Astromythos, and so it is written.
Well, how you doing, Jon?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Sideriadis, correct?
That's right, perfect.
I've listened to some of the interviews, so I've got an edge on some of the other people.
No one pronounced it right, so I appreciate that.
Well, like I was just saying to you, I got the opportunity to meet you at Gen Con, but it has me curious. I know you go to different kinds of conventions and fairs and stuff like that. Do you have a particular favorite or one where the crowd is most receptive of your work?
Gen Con.
Huh. Interesting.
Gen Con's the best. I never want to leave. It takes forever to get there, but I never want to leave. Because I live
Do you stay there the whole weekend usually?
Yeah. It's a long drive from Connecticut to Indianapolis, so but it's like I said, it's absolutely worth it. I stay there from Wednesday to Sunday, sometimes Monday, and I still don't do everything I would like to. There's such little time as a vendor there in the art alley.
Do you ever have anybody else attend your booth for you?
No. Well, I have a helper. My fiance helps me there. And she's also a gamer. Sometimes, we co-DM our D&D games and such. And she has read my book 3-4 times. So she's the only one really able to stand in for me when I go and, to the bathroom or get lunch or something like that. At the booth at Gen Con in the Artist Alley.
I think it's interesting. You've worked really good at articulating your pitch for your book, right? I feel like it's part of selling it to the masses. But I was entranced. I saw your booth, and it was just like gilded and cohesive in its style in a way that a lot of other booths are not. And that's what drew me to it instantly. And then it wasn't just aesthetic. There's substance there as well. There's a whole story there. So I don't know. Is that something that you have just stumbled into, or is that something that you've assessed other booths and been like, there's a niche here?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing I noticed about you when you walked over was the Zelda shirt, my favorite video game series. That will give you an idea of what my interests are, at least in the video game realm. But I actually gleaned a thing or two from Dave Wenzel. David Thorne Wenzel, the graphic novelist of The Hobbit, and one of my friends that I used to teach with at Lime Academy in Connecticut, in arts, in art school for college students who want to pursue art as a career. And he, showed me how to make and package the prints and where to buy them and this and that. But then I think, like what you said, I just walked around and and this is really important. It was very, very hard for me to figure out exactly how I wanted to set up my booth and even just what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to price images and prints and paintings, things like that. I just walked around and I looked at other artists' prices, and I sort of tried to determine whether or not they're as established as me, or they were, what their standing was, or how long they've been doing it. And I tried to find like some, I guess, matches for what I was doing. And then that's how I started pricing my items. So I'd look at their prints and their originals and such, and then I would just, start pricing my items on the spot, like just sitting there while people were walking by. Because you can't really, you got to set up, and then the next day you go in and the people come in, and the attendees are there, and you're scratching things under the table, like making your labels and things. There's always some last minute thing that I see everybody doing, unless they're really prepared. But
so very, very impromptu, just.
Yeah, there's always something that needs to be done. More prints need to be packaged, even after even if you come prepared. You need to package more prints and sign more prints as the show goes on, because sometimes you run out. So I boiled it down to like a little system, almost a science now, where it's pretty streamlined. And I have all my boxes, and every box is sort of Tetrised, so it'll fit everything inside, so that it fits in the back of my car, which is also a problem, trying to fit all my, inventory in my car and my setup, and driving halfway across the country almost, while being able to see out the window and out the back, which is, a safety precaution.
A little road hazard.
Yeah. So there's a lot to it. Takedown is easy, but when you go in there and you set up, you have to hang all your paintings. One time one of my paintings fell, and you can stop me if my question's too long-winded.
No, that's the whole point. That's why we have an hour here, so we can stretch out our time and really say what we want to say. But you sell your original works, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and for those who don't know, Jon's work is Astromythos, which is an ongoing work about the stars, and beautiful. He's got the limited edition cover there, and you do all the illustration, all of the writing. So you do your original works in various mediums, and then they end up as prints in the books. But you sell those original works, right?
Yeah. I sold a lot of the paintings for book 2 and book 1. Even before the first book was published, because that's how you were saying you were sort of drawn over to my booth with images. Mm-hmm. That's how I drummed up a lot of interest in the world and the story, just with the artwork. And then I was later able to write a story and put all those images into sort of arc and mythology.
Have there been any physical works that you've been reluctant to let go of? They sold and you're like, I'm not gonna have it anymore. It's
absolutely, definitely the banner art, the Pantocrator, the giant Viking-like character painting with a gold leaf in the back, painted like an icon. That one's sort of, I call it my Mona Lisa. I'm never gonna sell that one.
No price. No, when you get famous in 2 years and someone's like, I will pay you $2 million for your icon.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. More money, more problems, right?
That's true. That's true. But when you have the icon, you've got stability.
That's true. It's almost like, they say Da Vinci used to walk around. I'm not comparing my work at all to Mona Lisa, just so you know. But in Da Vinci's work, but he used to carry around his the Mona Lisa with him almost everywhere he went, as sort of like a good luck charm, and to show people that that was the best example of his style, sort of thing. It was just
like a business card kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's like if I sold it, I would never have the original to show, and I bring it to every single show, even tiny show. I do Greek festivals. I do little open studios and things like that. I one time did a Renaissance fair, and I bring that painting everywhere to every show. So yeah, and then there's some
Renaissance
paintings.
fair, that's open air, right? You're worried about exposing it to the elements?
Yeah, that's why I'll never do those again because the wind and the warping of the prints and books and things is just a nightmare. So I love going there as a guest, just to as a customer, just to walk around
Absolutely.
and get the turkey leg.
Get the turkey leg, get the root beer.
Yeah.
So you've spent over 20 years now developing this concept. I'm curious. I know that at this point, at least, you have a lot of people who are extremely supportive of your mission and your goal. Have there been people who have tried to dissuade you, who've told you, you
Oh
need
yeah.
to stop working on this, you need to shift your attention to something else? Like,
Oh, a lot of people like that. Sometimes without even realizing it, in a certain way, saying it in a certain way. But obviously, teachers in school and even acquaintances and friends and things. Just thinking it's like some side project for fun, or some coffee table book, or that I'll just never do it because I had been talking about
mm,
it for like about 20 years, and it started in the year 2000. I had been talking about it for so long that people didn't think I would ever finish it. They thought it was just like, oh, that's his book, his book. Um, but yeah, a lot of people would say, you should hear the things people say at the shows. I should make a list of the things people say. It's kind of funny. So, in one of my first shows, and a lot of the pieces for book two that I used to sort of promote the book and then to get the ball rolling, publishers and things, they had a grad show, and someone there, one of the parents or some adult or some teacher, this was at University of Hartford, where I went for grad school. The final show came up and said, "Hey, so what is this?" And I explained it to him, and he's like, "Oh, is it?" While chuckling, he was saying, "Is this from a universe far, far away?" And he started getting to Star Wars, and it's like, no, it's just it's original. It's not based on Star Wars. And then someone said, a more recent one was at a Greek festival, and I'm Greek, so I used to go volunteer at the festivals, but I started vending there, and I did really well. It turns out even at somewhere like that, which is in Gen Con or somewhere where there's a lot of geeks like me, and my book does very well. So I started going there, and one of the women said, "Oh, what is this?" I said, "It's fantasy fiction. It's mythology. It's for fans of science fiction and things like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones." And then she said, "Is it like Pokemon?" I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I do like Pokemon, and I was just watching it the other day, but I won't.
how do I tie this to
Won't tell her
Pokemon?
that.
I don't.
But I also was like, no, it's not
I
like
couldn't even draw a parallel if I wanted to.
it's,
It's
yeah. I don't even. Maybe some of my I have the atoms of my world, the elements
yeah.
like helium and hydrogen. Those are kind of like fairies, or kind of like Pokemon character designs, I guess. Like maybe a dark Pokemon, but that's the only connection I can draw.
Yeah,
I was
that's
a little offended, even though I do like Pokemon. Don't get me wrong. I think it's brilliant.
they're just trying to find something they can compare it to so
Yeah.
they can get a grasp of it, they're
And one woman said, "How did you even sell this book? You can't even sell it to me here at your table."
wow. Okay.
So you get a lot of that, and you sort of you develop a thick skin after a while, after hearing things like that for like 10 years of doing conventions and shows,
Mm-hmm.
that you've worked on for 20 years, and you poured your blood, sweat, and tears into it, and people call it Pokemon, or but you know that's their opinion. You focus on the good people who come up and talk to you, like you, and the kind people who say something nice. I almost feel like saying, because a lot of these are little old ladies, or sometimes it's like a middle-aged man or something like that. And it's like, if you don't have anything nice to say, you don't say anything nice at all, right?
Right,
That's
right.
something you say to like a little kid. It's like,
If you don't understand, just kind of nod your head and move along, but you don't have to
yeah, I always say, okay, thank you. Have a nice day. Enjoy the festival or enjoy the convention. And I'm thinking,
try not to let that sink into me.
yeah. And then like, hey, well, you know what? Maybe people just never grow up. I should write something
Mm,
about that. So
mm.
I don't take it personally. I just make it into an idea. I just
Uh,
channel it.
I know you get some of your inspiration, well, a lot of your inspiration from nature. One of my favorite like inspirational moments from part one is the mulberry tree. I love mulberry trees. I grew up with them all around, and you don't really hear them much in stories. So it's kind of like the specialty of the mulberry tree here, and I'm curious. Even like microbiology and stuff like that stuff you've looked into.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a nature inspiration that you found for part two? Like
Yeah,
a
part two is all
specific
about
natural
nature.
thing. I was thinking,
You're
that.
probably thinking that, yeah. Just some of my short descriptions of things, or just even, taking a look at some of the book two illustrations, which have a lot of woods and forests in them. But I love mulberry trees too. I used to pick them when I was a kid. My friend had one that I rarely saw, um, because it was like a friend of a friend back in the day when I was, I think, in middle school or something. But I did do some research, and I discovered that because I was looking up silkworms for my white dwarf star characters, and I found that the mulberry tree was the favorite tree of the silkworm. So that's why
Hmm.
that's in the story of Raftra, the first white dwarf star, because she gives birth to these little babies, like baby stars, and they look like silkworms. And then when they grow up, they look more like people, but kind of like Freudian, if that makes sense. Um,
So one of my favorite illustrations in the book, to be honest, of Raftra with her wings out and her cloak on,
there's
and
one of the white dwarfs.
beautiful, beautiful. Wait, hold on. I'm about to nerd out for a second and go ahead and
There
pull
it is.
that up for you. Yeah.
Were you one of the people that rolled a 20?
No,
Okay.
I ordered that through your website.
Oh, nice. Okay, thank you.
Astromythos, astromythos.com. Goodness.
Yeah, okay. That's
Um,
right. The other day, right? Yep, I remember that.
well, I I'm curious. You've got part one. You got part two. You're working on. Do you have a plan for how many parts there's going to be, or is this something that you're just going to organically go with until you find your stories out?
I'm probably either going to work until I lose my mind or I'm burnt out, or which could be I don't know, forever. Maybe when I'm like 80 or something. But the my I guess my tentative plan is to write 3 books, and I'm almost done with
Okay.
book 2. So yeah, a trilogy is the plan. Maybe, and this is like a really, really, really big maybe, it might turn into a series of more than 3 books, in
Okay.
some capacity. I mean, the module that I'm working on for 5th edition is sort of like branching off from that, and maybe that could turn into something like that. But um, yeah, 3 books.
You've mentioned it, so I feel like it's a good segue. But the module itself, is that? I mean, when we play that, are we playing as stars? Are we playing as humans? What's that set in? What's that?
It would be very. I thought about the player characters playing as stars, and anthropomorphized stars, like in book 1. But I think book 2, and I selected book 2 as the sort of like, I
Hmm.
don't know, the system or the milieu for the modules. Um, I would love for the characters to be star warriors and vampire stars and brown dwarves and pepper giants and things like that. But there's a scale issue, and those
Yeah.
characters are actually in the module.
Hmm.
Um, as NPCs. So you see the, you're going to be hearing from giant stars and planets and moons, things like that. But yeah, it's it was a lot easier to base it on book 2, which has humans and characters that are closer to the character classes and folks in D&D.
How long have you been role playing, doing tabletop?
Uh, I don't know, long time. What
Have
about
you
you?
always DM'd? Well, I've done it maybe. Oh God, 9 years now at this point. I
Nice.
think.
It's fun.
Um, yeah,
I love
but I started with the Star Wars system,
Star
which
Wars.
uses narrative dice instead of the D20s.
Okay.
The concept is you have like success and failure, and
Yeah,
then you have triumph and despair, which work hand in hand with your success or your failure. So
it's
you can
interesting.
succeed with despair, or you can fail with triumph. So
It's very
it
realistic.
cannot go, yeah, it cannot go the way you want it to, but go another good way or go another bad way.
Mhm.
Very interpretive to narrative. Slows the game down a little bit because you're not just like, boom, I do this, I have this ability, I hit for this much. It's kind of, let's interpret our way through this. But I've enjoyed it because of
That's a
that.
great mechanic. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And I've worked to develop settings and stuff like that as well. But I'm curious, when you are developing your module, are you trying to directly adapt all of the mechanics from 5e to yours? Are you trying to develop new mechanics, blend old D&D mechanics from like the previous versions?
Um, Blending old. I'm doing a little bit of each. Blending some old module book conventions or styles with newer mod books, like the one that came with the starter set, Fandelver.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you're familiar with that one, the Mines of Fandelver. Um, and I'm developing new characters, new items, new game mechanics, new NPCs, and possibly, I'm still on the fence about this, new player character classes,
Hmm. Hmm.
even races, or sorry, folks. So um, a little bit of everything, a little bit of everything I like from like about D&D. I mean, to answer your question from before, I think I started playing tabletop games really seriously and became really big board game geek when Hero Quest came out in '89, and I still have my original set. That's my favorite game ever. But I designed a little bit of it based on that. Some of the, you know, I guess the language and the wording and even the dialogue.
Hmm.
It's just very, very slightly campy because I feel like that's something that's missing in our media today. Everything's so serious and dramatic. I mean, I can't talk because my book is really dramatic and heavy, but um, the module is supposed to be fun and it's supposed to remind me
Hmm.
of monsters and villains like Skeletor, and,
Okay. Okay.
Monstar and Mumra. You
These
know,
kind of big, over the top, almost caricaturized villains.
I love that. I mean, I grew up with that. I was an '80s kid, so I loved He-Man and Thundercats and Silverhawks and things like that. GI Joe. So I've been watching actually a lot of GI Joe lately. Yeah, I love characters like that, like Cobra Commander, Destro, Baroness. Um, but obviously it's a little more serious at times, and yeah,
We've been playing Pathfinder recently, and I feel
yeah,
like its goal from a uh, feeling standpoint is to kind of be that wacky, not high fantasy, but almost like a pulpy fantasy. Something a little bit more campy and a little bit more
right.
goofy at times.
Hmm.
So do you normally DM when you actually play? Are you the DM?
Yeah, that's my favorite role. Hmm. DMing is my favorite. I just can't play as a player character and have as much fun. And it's the fault of Hero Quest. because I was always the Zargon, the game master in that, and that of course led me to play D&D. But I'm playing as a player character now.
Okay.
In a campaign that my fiance is running. We're just about to finish it. We do all homebrew, and then I'm probably
Hmm.
going to run a campaign after that. That's both a playtesting version of the module for Astromythos, and just something I wanted to run. That's a little bit like Spelljammer and something like that. Um, there's some dark sun sort of undertone or notes in there, but yeah, and it's good because I didn't know it, but they're bringing all those back.
Right, right. They're
Spelljammer.
revamping that.
And I thought that was always great. I mean, because in book two, the starships are almost like what you'd see in Treasure Planet, something like that,
Right, right. Kind of
or
like
Spelljammer.
aether ship type style.
Mhm. And they're described as their description is inspired by one of my favorite books, which is the Kalevala. Um, as these giant ships with sails of metal, so they almost sound like spacecrafts or starcrafts, but they're still medieval in a way.
Right, right.
So I think it's perfect timing for the module to come out, because I even mentioned I was writing this the other day in the module. It can easily be used in homebrew games of Spelljammer, Dark Sun, D&D 5e, and things like
I'm
that.
cu- I'm curious. You've been thinking of Astromythos for so long. Have you tried to run a D&D campaign in it before, prior to trying to make this module? Have you tried to introduce the world to your players?
I did, and it was only after doing that and hearing at places like Gen Con and LuxCon that I should, maybe one day consider turning this into a module, that I started really seriously considering it. And
Hmm.
here I am writing the module now, and it was only really when I getting back to if I used it before, I've even thought about making the module. It was only really like a character here and there, like some stats that I would make up for a monster that was like a photovore from my book that when killed became a black hole. So I was coming up with stats for the black hole or game.
Huh.
So when you kill it, it keeps expanding and expanding, and the heroes have to, or the player characters have to escape before it eats them. So they think that the villain's dead, and yay, the game's over. But then the black hole starts trying to eat them
Oh God.
beyond the grave. So, and a lot of the characters, one of which is in the module, are the ghosts of the photovores. So they're these black holes that roam around, and that's where the name comes from, the Eater of Light. Because when these spider stars called photovores die, they become black holes. They bleed vacuum, black. It almost looks like oil,
Hmm.
like the oil that comes out of your car when you need an oil change,
Yeah.
and it just becomes a black hole. And it's this dark creature that still kind of looks like a spider, but it just keeps growing and growing. And the more it eats, the more it grows, especially stars and things.
How do you rationalize giving stats to a black hole? Where's the it's one of the strongest gravitational forces in the known universe. How do you
Right.
grapple with giving actual stats to that?
So what happens is it grows in power to the point where obviously eventually it'll do what astronomers theorize,
Uh-huh.
where it'll just suck in a whole planet or start. It would eat the sun. But when you kill, and I have these characters called Spider Lords in book two, one of which you have to vanquish in order to complete the module. And they're these small photovores. Whereas photovores in
Hmm.
the first book are giant stars. They're just star
Right.
size. There's evil stars. So when you kill one of those, there's actually a world around it. It's standing somewhere. It's not just like a star in space where there might not be things around to swallow or to eat.
Hmm.
So let's say it's in a dungeon, you kill it, and it's small, and it doesn't really do much damage. It's just it almost feels like a vacuum cleaner is
Yeah.
like sucking in like the dust, and it's like, oh, it must be like a little strange tornado and forming in the middle of the room. But then it becomes darker and darker, and the room grows dark, and all the lights go out, and then it grows bigger, and then it starts sucking in like the bookshelves. It might start with the dust, and then the paper, and then the books, and then the bookshelves, and then it starts sucking in the stones from the floor in the room, and then it gets more powerful, and then it starts sucking in the wandering monsters or the characters or whoever's there, the corpses, and then it sucks in the whole dungeon, then the whole town, the whole city, then the world, and the galaxy, and so on, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing until there's nothing more to eat. So if it consumes the entire galaxy, then it sort of stops there. But there's a way to stop it, and that's one of the interesting game mechanics in the module. If you stop it in time, it's sealed, and none of that happens. And it might suck in like the room or something, or the part of the dungeon,
like a corner of the room, or what?
Mm-hmm.
The left wing of a palace or something.
Yeah,
like
yes. Exactly. If that answers your question.
Yeah. How would you compare writing? Because you've got the story formulating in your brain for 20 years, and you start writing. I don't know what 3 years ago, 4 years ago now, and really like getting it down onto paper and articulating it. How would you compare the emotional mental strain of doing that versus writing the module?
It's night and day. Well,
one's fun and one's laborious.
Maybe like afternoon and day. One is very, very laborious, and that's the main book because of the style. It's just it's written in poetic verse. It's an epic poem. So,
beautiful. Do you want to read a sample for people so they could taste it?
I could read the intro and then maybe some passages, or just some stanzas.
Yeah.
Some passages.
Whatever calls to you.
Well, for people who don't know much about the story, I can read from the main book. Especially people who are interested in the module, which is something I'm almost even halfway done with now. But this is from book 1. This is the introduction. And hopefully Banjo doesn't bark in the background. It says, once in space and time primeval, when all the cosmos dwelled in darkness, something called a star appeared. We know not where, nor how, or why. But it would change the cosmos forever. Stars are strange and beautiful creatures. If we look at our sun too long, it blinds us. If we linger too long in the sun, it burns us. Too much sun can make a desert, but without the sun, our world would die. Neither tree nor fragile flower, no living creature would exist. There would be no light, no warmth, only darkness, cold, and death. But stars like the sun are beacons of hope. The sun never sleeps, it burns without fail, and stars do not wish to be rewarded. They do what must be done. In the universe primeval, there are some who wish to banish light, to extinguish the stars forever. These are known as black hole stars, photovores, stars of evil, the most destructive force in the universe, the most destructive in the cosmos. Their evil is eternal. Such is the burden of stars, the fate of the universe, stars like our sun, for only stars can slay black holes, only stars can hold them at bay. So begins the mythology of stars, Astromythos, and so it is written.
So that passage is a passage of labor, right? That is...
Yeah. That's more like the module. That diction and that language, that style, and that pacing, prose, basically.
Right.
And then if you read something in the book, in the body of the book, in one of the myths, and there are 10 myths per book that are tied together by a narrator and an overarching story arc. Let's see. For instance, if you read about Photovoros and Elxis, the first black hole star and the first pulsar, we turn to that page. And I could read you the ending. It's a very different tone. Here it is. So this is the ending. And I'll read a couple stanzas. And in due course, his heart grew cold. This is a description of the ultimate demise of Photovoros, who is a hypergiant star that grows too big and is cursed in death to become a black hole, a supermassive black hole, and then he becomes the king of all black holes, the lord of black holes, the Photovoros. And in due course his heart grew cold, cold as he clung unto his crown, clung to hope of slaying his siblings, clung to hate as not to drown, to slaying Elxis for taking his life, for tearing out his very soul. Elxis was his lover. The souls of stars he would devour, swallow back all that she stole. His faith he lost in stars, his kind, that she to haunt him would not cease. He spied her face upon all things, no beauty found, nor even peace. And the last stanza reads, what good is embrace if it must end, if gravity can bring it down? What good is it to pluck a rose, to keep a rose that time paints brown? The king and his kin feel pain no more, feel they nothing, need they naught, nor ever would they weep again, nor heed their hearts, nor free the thought of passing, thought of ending, the brooding thought of mortal breath. But such is the way of a black hole, one who lives to linger on death. So that's a stanza from the story. I should wear one of those French beanies.
Black behind you.
Yeah.
But that's laborious to write that way. It's not a simple task to just jot that down on paper. That requires a lot of counting and a lot of thought.
Yeah, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Rhyming. Yep. And matching the rhyming with a meaning, or at least plugging in a rhyme that is, I guess, appropriate to the meaning of the stanza, because I often put wisdom quotes in there, and the flow of the story, and that makes sense. It's not just a rhyme; it has to represent a lot of different things.
Right.
So the rhyming actually, I think, is one of the reasons it takes so long.
It needs to have worth in the stanza. It needs to move it forward, not just be a rhyme.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. There's so much punctuation, and not just in periods and commas, but in just the pacing of this style of writing, that you have to constantly come up with ways to keep those broken stanzas flowing. So I'm reading old Italian folk tales, Chinese poetry, and watching Jim Henson's Storyteller with John Hurd. Just for little fairy tale hooks and transitional sentences and beginnings of paragraphs and things that keep the flow going. And because this is not like the typical way of writing fantasy anymore. But that was my point. I wanted to bring back something old that I really liked, and then it's my favorite thing to read. The old world tales like Odyssey and Aeneid, and the Theogony of Hesiod and Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I want to bring that to the fantasy world again of literature and books. So it's very, very difficult. The module is more fun because I play D&D for fun, and it's more like DMing and coming up with homebrew content than it is writing like an epic poem, which is very, very daunting and extremely difficult. Because you're juggling a million things. With the mod, you're just juggling like maybe 10, 20 different ideas and metaphors and layers and this and that. But it's extremely hard. That's why it takes me so long.
You're very multifaceted as an artist, right? You're a writer, you're a poet, you're you are a fine artist, but you work with both 3D and 2D and multiple mediums. But I am curious, is there something in your creative journey as you've been developing the story and writing it that you went, man, I really wish I had learned this specific thing 10 years ago. I wish I had taken a class on this, because that would be helping me out so much right now.
As far as the visual art goes, you mean?
As far as any of the process goes.
That happens all the time. I wish I knew everything. I mean, I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid, but I could never do it. I would probably get too nauseous, and I wear glasses, and yeah, I'm not good at math. I was horrible at math. I had 2 tutors. Um, but yeah, and then this happens. I forget the question.
Is there
Sleeping.
a talent or a skill or
Oh yeah.
maybe even being taught on a specific subject that you wish you had more of so you could articulate your vision better?
Um, that's a long answer. Uh, I wish. I mean, I wish I had learned how to use stained glass and craft with stained glass better. I mean, um, chasing, represent, like a beaten metal, jewel smithing, jewelry. Um, I wish I'd gone to more writing workshops, but that would have taken me even longer to come out with a book. And a big problem when I was, coming up with the idea and just trying to get the book out there, and trying to stop people from saying, when is the book coming out? And people like sort of never thinking I was going to finish it, was, if I don't finish this, um, someone's going to do something similar. And then when my book comes out, it's not going to be that different and fresh and like groundbreaking. I was always afraid of that for years and years and years and years, over 10 years or maybe 15 more. So there were always things that I wish I had done. I'm very interested in everything, and I think that helps a world builder. I mean, I teach world building as a professor, and I always tell my students, you need to start a garden, start paying more attention to nature, or the way, even when you're washing your hands, the way bubbles like crowd around your fingers, the webbing or something like that when you're using soap, or pay more attention to the world. Put down your phone. There's so much you can do out there than just playing like an app on your phone. And I've done stuff like that. I probably have an app on my phone right now that I sometimes play. I have a Game Boy in the other room, but I'm very, very curious. And I think you need to be, as a writer and a world builder, always, not just until the point when you're published and you're done and you feel comfortable and you can rest on your laurels, but you should always be out there. I'm always hiking, really, really paying attention through the lens of an artist and a world builder. And I'm sure a lot of other people are, but that's my answer to that question.
I want your input on something, because similar to what you said with being attached to your phone, in the more modern sense of presenting art and your mediums, your creations, there's kind of a drive from both the industry and the individuals to make quick, to produce a lot in small amounts of time. What are the merits of taking your time on something?
Creating something original, or at least something that's not as derivative as other creations in the media. I think there's a lot of dangers of taking your time, because I mentioned one earlier. Someone will borrow or steal your idea, and that's happened to me many, many times. Or that's just happened in the media. Like I've come up with an idea like 10 years ago, and then I'm watching something on an ad, and they have my idea, and I don't even know these people. We just had the same idea. It's just coincidence. It's like, all right, well, I have to scrap that idea, and that was like half the story of this story. And but taking your time is really, really important, because so many things are rushed. So many people just want things in an instant. I know, and I'm guilty of that too. We live in a world where if something doesn't happen in like a few minutes, or if you can't learn something in a day, or you can't watch a video in like 5 minutes, then you start thinking about changing the channel or clicking off of that page, and it's really detrimental to human creativity, I think. Although it's very important for an artist to be on social media and to be on their phone and to advertise. I'm horrible at that. Social media stresses me out, so I'm never on it. Um, but if you take your time, you have more to post about. You have more works in progress, WIPs, and you can generate hype and interest, and that was actually really helpful. I used to spend a lot of time on social media, just promoting and just talking about and feeling excited about my drawings, my paintings, and that really helped generate a lot of interest and a big enough fan base that I was able to go on Kickstarter and get the book funded. So it was definitely for me worth it to spend so much time on it, because I met so many people and on social media and at these little festivals and big shows that were really interested and were ready, when the Kickstarter came out to back the book and to support me. Without that, it would just have been out there, and I wouldn't have as much, maybe it wouldn't have been funded. I don't know. As much of a backing or interest in this new. I mean, it's a new story, especially if it's something new. It's not like the next Star Wars or like an expansion to an existing game or like a, Diablo 4 or something, or people aren't going to know what it is. They're just going to assume it's like this or it's like that or whatever. I already have a big list of books that I have to read. So you really have to work it. You have to sell your IP, and it's very hard. But that's, the good thing about taking a lot of time to write it.
Was there ever a point in time, because this just struck me today, where I think the only work that I have read that's not a more, I would say, traditional myth that involves the stars and is not science fiction is like Italo Calvini's work.
Oh yeah, I read his work.
And so it struck me today where you steered very much into the fantasy realm of space. Was there ever a time where you were like, I'm gonna make it sci-fi, or has it always? You saw the Horsehead Nebula. Did that immediately tie you to fantasy at that point in time? And you're like, the myths of the old world and the fantasies of more classical writers, like that seems to be your deep inspiration, but I'm curious.
Sort of. I mean, I had to stick with the fantasy genre and some sort of system of magic, somewhat, in order to make that, like the Horsehead Nebula, believable as I saw it. And I saw it as a character that's made of stardust walking through space. And I was like, okay, that could be my narrator. But the answer, I think the core of the question, I used to be interested more in science fiction. I'm still a big fan of Star Wars, more so the old stuff. And I grew up with Nintendo, and then Halo came out, and Star Fox 64 and things like that. And I played like games like Space Hulk and Warhammer 40,000. And I was really interested in telling the story with those visuals. But then as I grew older and I started reading things like Beowulf and Lord of the Rings and the classics and looking at old world Golden Age illustrations of Nordic tales and reading the poetic Eddas and things like that, the Volsung's story, I started appreciating fantasy so much more. And if you really look back at things like Star Wars, it's heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings, the structure, the storytelling, the monomyth, all of that. So it became more important to me. And of course, my favorite book is The Hobbit, so I can't get away from that. But it's interesting because book one feels more like a fantasy story or creation myth, and book two, it reads sort of like Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, but there's a lot more science fiction in it, where technology is a presence, and advanced human technology is wiped out by the stellar wind, one of the evil stars in book one.
Is it would we see it similar more to like how you describe like Treasure Planet, Aether ships, that kind of science fiction, or is it more fuel cells, energy pods?
No, I that's a really good question. I go out of my way to not say things like fuel cells and energy pods and electricity, because I'm telling, for one thing, I want it to feel more like fantasy than science fiction. And this goes back to, of course, like, Warhammer 40K and He-Man and things, stories that combined a little fantasy and a little science fiction. But the narrator is a star, is a protostar, star that never formed.
Interesting.
So he's telling the story in his own words. So when he
Right.
sees something like electricity, he calls it lightning. It contained lightning, or like lightning cells and things like, batteries.
Yeah.
And all he knows is that lightning, then the sound of it is the death throes of a star.
Huh.
And it's how stars, and that's mentioned in the module too. It's also in book 2. That's how stars, evil stars, even after they're dead, can still wreak vengeance on their enemies. And that's what happens to the planet that's like Earth in the book. And it's called Zos. One of the evil stars from book 1 comes back via lightning and strikes. I won't spoil it, but so yeah. So he's like, describing things in a really weird way, from like a medieval standpoint, but also a stars standpoint.
Right.
Stars have a
Right.
different language, and they don't know what, like a computer is. That it's like insignificant to them, because they also see humans as little ants. Like, building their cities are kind of like ant mounds to stars, and they're significant to him in a way, though. And that his journey through book 2 as a narrator describes how humans are more and more important to him than they seemed at first, because he was sent to spy on them and potentially, by spying on them, help his brother destroy them, because his brother's afraid that their mother, who is evil to them, is going to use and wield humans to destroy the stars. But in book 2, they soon discover that it's not them; it's just the Fortivores who are just eating all the stars, and they're just wasting their time looking for the wrong person. They got the wrong guy. And the narrator discovers that toward the end of book 2.
I've got a couple of questions brewing in my head. One is, you're already in 2 mediums with your story, right? The fine art medium, and then the text medium, and now you're going into a third one with the module, right? That's a completely different way to ingest story and art. Do you foresee in the future going to or attempting to go to other mediums, audiobook, animation perhaps, or film or something like that? Is that something, because as I was reading part 1, I'm like, how would you you're playing out the scene in your brain, and I'm like, how would you go about directing some of these scenes? I mean, that would be a heavy burden on somebody to even storyboard something like this. But is that something that's crossed your mind?
Yeah. It would be great animation, traditional animation, 2D animation, or something like Harmony, which is a 3D animation software that looks 2D on the screen. I was approached by someone who wanted to make a shadow puppet version
Interesting.
of Astromythos, an animation, and it wasn't quite my thing. So we had some creative differences because of that. But nothing bad. We just said, let's just
Right. Just not how you envision your story
ever do
being
it.
told.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it was interesting to see someone reach out like that. It was a producer from Canada. And I have a contact in England, because you mentioned audiobooks, who did a great reading of I don't know, just a couple paragraphs for the launch. And he said that he would do an audiobook, but of course that costs time and money. And that's something that I anticipate doing at some point. Maybe when all the books are finished, like an audiobook of all of them or something like that. A trilogy audiobook. But I'm not sure. I mean, I'm pretty reclusive. I might have mentioned that before. I'm not good with video cameras and photos and social media and things like that. And I don't reach out to anyone for anything. Maybe just rarely. I like to just sit in my studio and work and be in my vacuum, almost good kind of vacuum.
Your cave of creativity.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a behind the scenes kind of person, so
Yeah.
I don't want it to get too crazy, you know.
Well, the other thought that was kind of, this is a question I hesitate to ask because I don't want to stir any sort of existential crises, but you think part three, and
Yeah.
then that's it.
Um,
What happens when you set it down? What happens when you get to the point where your 20 plus years of work is at a wrap? You've told your story.
well, that's probably going to be 10 years from now,
Okay.
maybe less, depending on how life goes and family and.
So you got some time, yeah.
But after that's done, I do have plans to possibly do some children's book and Greek mythology,
Hmm.
telling in the style of my books, and more in like a verse with my style of illustration. Um, and then whatever projects, I still do freelance projects, but I'm very picky. I sort of quit freelance to just work on my books and to
Yeah.
teach because I teach full time. Um, But yeah, when the 3 books are done, I don't know if that answers your question well, but when the 3 books are finished, that's sort of what I'm going to get into. If the modules are still popular, I might make more of those.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like I said much earlier, it could be there could be other books too, like book 4, book 5, and so on, or just like Lost Tales sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Small illustrated poetry books from the world of Astromythos, and I might just like branch off into other projects that are sort of like companion products for the trilogy for the people who have all the books and they want like
Hmm.
like a like poetry books based in that world, or Lost Tales, or the module, or maybe even a game or something like that, like electronic gamers or something like that. But I don't know. I'm gonna let it be, let the whole process be organic and see where it takes me, and try
Hmm.
not to force anything. I just want people to enjoy it and be inspired.
Absolutely, and let it flow naturally.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be too much of like a. I know this is a cliche, but I don't want it to be too much of a sellout. I don't want it
Hmm.
to be like a there to be, and I don't think this is gonna ever happen. But Astromythos toothbrushes and like toilet paper and like a cereal and
So
you
you
know
wouldn't, like, James Cameron approaches you and he's like, "We're ditching the rest of the Avatar series that I planned out. It's not worth it. Astro Mythos is where it is. We're approved for a $300 million budget, and
actually.
we're gonna make this."
Actually, I did a lot of. I Before I went into school for film, which is what I first wanted to study. I read James Cameron's biography. He's one of my
Uh
favorite directors because of Aliens, and Battle Beyond the Stars, things like that.
huh.
Um, yeah, I might consider that. But if it were to become what I think, if it were to become too commercialized and too
Hmm.
merchandise, I think it would just, you know, it
Kind
would
of
just
soil it.
spoil it. It would,
Yeah.
and it would also defeat the purpose of the story, especially
Right.
book 2,
Hmm.
because that's an important part of the story.
Well, I don't want to spoil book 2, but we're nearing the end of our time, so I've got one last kind of query for you. Um, how was publishing first time around, and getting the book printed, and I forget the name of the company you worked with at this point in time, but uh, are you continuing to work with them moving forward? Was that a success, or are you changing the strategy for the second time around?
I'm definitely changing the strategy. I'm already talking to a different printer who's domestic, out in California, who could do some, some different things with the printing and the overlays and things like that. But that was the hardest part, I'd say. as far as I know, it took me about 5 years just to find a publisher. And that's, you know, if you don't find a publisher, then it may as well have never happened. It's just something you have in a shoebox somewhere. And I didn't want it to be. I poured so much work into this that I kept looking and looking, and every publisher was saying, this is too strange. We don't know how to market this. And I reached out to agents. I sent query letters. It took forever and ever to find a publisher because it was such a strange book. Nothing is written like this anymore. And it's not based on anything. It's completely original, so no one knew what to think about it. And then it's very hard to read because it's kind of like the Fairy Queen or the Odyssey.
Right.
And I was worried that I wasn't finding a publisher because people were going to think it's something like that you're assigned in school that you have to read over like 2 or 3 times. It's very dense. And that was some of the feedback that I was getting until the art order. My publisher said, I reached out to them. They said, this is exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for something different. We don't want like your typical prose book or art book. We want something that's completely original and different. And I thought that was great. So finally, I was able to take advantage of online publishing, which I'd never really heard of or knew anything about. But apparently, it's very, very popular now. And I'm hearing that like big companies, like even the Dwarven Forge, if you're familiar with them, they run Kickstarters for every project. And it seemed more and more like, I guess legitimate is a bad word, for lack of a better word, the way to go. The way the publishing process that I should pick. So it actually ended up working out really well, and it was worth the 5 years of just looking and taking trains to New York and talking to people who worked at Tor and this and that, and then going to conventions just to ask. It was a lot of work, just fruitless for many years, but very, very, very difficult. And I think the one thing that helped me personally with the book, especially since I've never been published before as a writer, was the art. That really helped me get published. And the creator of the art order knew who I knew. He was in the same circle. We had met at a LuxCon, and that's where he gave me his card. And is also just good networking and keeping up contacts and keeping in touch and keeping cards. I had his card for like 3-4 years until before I contacted him. It was just sitting on my drafting table for years and years and years, and I almost lost it once. And I don't know why I keep cards. I could just go online and look up his name and find it. I'm still stuck in the 90s or something, but yeah. So it was hard. It was tough. But
and so you'll stick with them going forward?
No, I'm not going to stick with them. Probably going to try again to self-publish. But yeah, and look for another publisher. And
you think that'll be easier this time around, having had your work published already? Like you said, lends credibility to you within the industry that you've already gotten something published. Do you think finding somebody this time around is going to be a lot easier?
I think it'll be a little easier, especially with the success of the book and having published something already that sold so many copies. Not a crazy amount of copies, but I think just enough to make it a little easier to find a publisher again, all over again. Because people know what the book is. It's published. It's made. And I have some contacts through various conventions, and so we're hoping that works. Otherwise, I'll just self-publish because I know how to do all of it now, even though it's a ton of work. It comes down to how much time you have, really. But yeah.
Well, one last little thing to any aspiring world builders out there. Do you have a small nugget of advice that you can kind of drop in their hands for if they're feeling overwhelmed or if they're feeling frustrated with their work?
Small piece of advice. Let's see. go somewhere, do something different. If they're feeling frustrated, either artist block or writer's block or world building block, go into the world. Go to a museum, save up, and travel somewhere, or just take a road trip, see something different, do some research on the place you're going first, of course, but it'll really open up your mind, and it'll inspire you, because if you get inspired, then you can sit back down when you get home and you can fill in those missing pieces. And that's usually what works for me, other than time. But that maybe is also maybe it's just me. If these people are the same way, then they feel bad if they haven't done anything in a long time, not productive, and like they're wasting their life. And that's sort of like, this little voice inside my head that reminds me, okay, you're not doing anything. You're being a bum. Go do something. I almost get it every day, even when I'm supposed to be having fun or on vacation. I'm like, you shouldn't be having fun. Why are you having so much fun? It's kind of a bad thing, but it's also good in a way. It has its pros and cons. But life is short. Do something great.
Well, thank you for coming out, Jon. I want to say I'm highly recommend. Go to the website. I'm going to have it linked in the description. Go purchase Astromythos. The art book's up there as well. Go get it. It's been a book that I have truly enjoyed from first purchasing, and it's unique. I mean, you say it a lot, but I want to reinforce that, because I don't want people to think you're just blowing smoke. It is a very unique piece of work.
Thank you.
And visually unique as well. And I foresee it going places. Even if we do not live to see it, I foresee this growing in the future. It just has that feeling about it.